Okay, lazy gardeners, sit down for this one because it's going to make you angry. There are 15 fruits that grew wild across this continent for thousands of years, feeding millions of people without a single drop of pesticide, without irrigation, without anyone babying them in a greenhouse, and today almost nobody has ever tasted a single one. 99% of people you know have never even heard of these. That is not some accident of nature. That is a choice somebody made a long time ago, and today we are undoing it, one lazy backyard at a time. Stick around because fruit number 7 was actually illegal to grow for decades, and by fruit 15, you will look at your own backyard completely differently. Let's get into it. So why did these fruits just vanish from our plates? 3 reasons, and as a lazy gardener, you will love at least one of them. First, colonization wiped out the knowledge systems that kept these plants alive. Second, big industrial farming only wanted crops that could survive a truck ride across the country and sit on a shelf for weeks. Most of these fruits rot within days of being picked, meaning they were too good and too fresh for the supermarket system. And third, indigenous food knowledge was deliberately stamped out, generation after generation, until most families never passed it down. Comment below if you think we lost something huge here. Here's why this matters right now, not as some history lesson. The average person eats maybe 15 different plants their entire life. Our climate is shifting, and a lot of our grocery store crops are not built to handle it. These fruits were never just snacks. They were medicine, they traveled hundreds of miles through trade, and they were quite literally the reason entire communities survived brutal winters. And here is the kicker for those of us who are proudly lazy in the garden. These plants thrived without pesticides, without irrigation, without any of the expensive infrastructure we have been convinced we need. Sounds like the dream low-maintenance plant to me. Let's start with one that is already making a serious comeback. Fruit number 1, the pawpaw. This is America's largest native fruit, called the forgotten banana because the inside is custard soft, with a flavor somewhere between mango, banana, and melon. Eastern tribes harvested these every fall, and Lewis and Clark famously survived on pawpaws when their expedition ran out of food. So why did it disappear? It does not ship. It bruises if you breathe on it wrong, and spoils within 2 days of ripening, making it worthless to industrial agriculture. But right now there is a whole movement of pawpaw festivals, backyard orchards, and even pawpaw beer. You can find pawpaw trees at native plant nurseries across the East Coast and Midwest. And for a lazy gardener, a tree that just feeds itself and asks for nothing is basically the dream. Fruit number 2, the American persimmon. This is not the giant orange fuyu persimmon you see at the grocery store. That one is from Asia. The American version is smaller, but when it hits perfect ripeness, it tastes like a date mixed with apricot and brown sugar. Cherokee, Creek, and dozens of other tribes dried these for winter, baked persimmon bread, and even used the seeds as buttons and game pieces. It got pushed out because Asian varieties were easier to mass-produce with bigger, more predictable fruit. But here's the controversial part. The American persimmon is actually tougher, more cold-hardy, and more pest-resistant than the imported one we all settled for. They are starting to show up at farmers' markets, especially across the Southeast, and foragers are now mapping wild persimmon trees just to protect them from getting bulldozed for development. Fruit number 3, maypop. Most people have no idea North America has its own wild passion fruit. It is called maypop, and it grows wild from Pennsylvania down to Florida, with a flavor that is tropical, tangy, and shockingly aromatic for something growing in a random ditch. Tribes used the entire plant, fruit for food, and roots and leaves as a calming natural sedative. It faded out because commercial passion fruit from South America took over, and maypops have a brutally short harvest window. You basically have to catch them the exact day they ripen. But herbalists and wild foragers are bringing it back, and here is some good lazy gardener news. Maypop vines are ridiculously easy to grow, almost aggressively easy. If you have ever struggled to keep a plant alive, this one might genuinely struggle to die. If you are even a little bit shocked that you have never tried any of these, drop a comment and tell me which number you are most curious about, because I read every single one of them. Fruit number 4, the beach plum. Small, tart, deep purple fruits growing along the Atlantic coast from Maine to Maryland. Coastal tribes depended on these heavily, and early colonial settlers turned beach plum jam into a regional staple some families still make today. The flavor is like a regular plum, but more concentrated and far more complex. They started disappearing because we paved over their habitat with beach houses and boardwalks. Since beach plums need that specific sandy, salty soil right against the ocean, and we decided vacation homes were more important. Some conservation groups are now replanting beach plums specifically to stabilize sand dunes and rebuild coastal ecosystems. You can find beach plum preserves at specialty shops across New England, and several nurseries now sell the shrubs directly. Fruit number 5, the wild plum. Long before European plums showed up, native wild plums fed people from coast to coast. There are several species: Chickasaw plum down south, Canada plum up north, all smaller but far more flavorful than anything at a grocery store. Tribes made dried plum cakes that lasted for months, traded plum saplings across regions, and used the bark for medicine. Wild plums got phased out because European varieties produced bigger, more uniform fruit that was easier to sell. But here is the trade-off nobody talks about. Wild plums are tougher, shrugging off drought, pests, and extreme temperature swings that would wipe out a commercial orchard. Foragers still stumble onto wild plum thickets across rural areas, and some growers are crossing them with domestic plums to build climate-resilient hybrids. Okay, pause right there. Comment which of those first 5 you have actually tried, and I'm willing to bet most of you are sitting at a flat 0. And that's exactly the problem. Subscribe now if you want more of this kind of digging, because what I'm about to say next is the part nobody wants to admit on camera. This was never just neglect. The knowledge transfer was deliberately broken. Indigenous children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools where speaking their own language got them punished. Entire communities were forcibly relocated away from the exact land where these plants grew. Foraging on public and private land was made flat out illegal in a lot of places. And for over a century, the official story was that indigenous food systems were primitive and needed to be replaced by modern agriculture. Sit with that for a second. Imagine your own grandchildren never knowing what a real apple tastes like, not because apples went extinct, but because somebody in power decided that knowledge simply was not worth saving. That is, word for word, what happened here. And the loss is not only nutritional, it is cultural, spiritual, and ecological. It should make you a little angry too. Alright, the next 5 get even wilder, so stay with me. Fruit number 6, chokecherry. Yes, the name sounds terrible, but do not let that scare you off. This dark red to almost black fruit was one of the most important foods across the entire Great Plains and mountain region. Eaten raw, it is intensely astringent, hence the name, but dried or cooked, it transforms into something rich, sweet, and almost wine-like. Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot communities mix chokecherries with bison fat and dried meat to create compact survival food that could last for years. The wood was carved into arrows and tools, and the bark had real medicinal uses. Chokecherries got pushed out because cattle ranchers saw them as weeds that might poison livestock, so they were actively ripped out. But chokecherries are making a genuine comeback through indigenous-led food sovereignty projects, and you can now find chokecherry syrup and jam from native-owned businesses online. Fruit number 7, the wild grape, and here is the one that was actually illegal. North America has multiple native species of wild grape, the direct ancestors of most wine grapes grown today. But wild grapes have thicker skins, more seeds, and roughly 5 times the antioxidant content of store-bought table grapes. Tribes ate them fresh, dried them like raisins, and turned the juice into drinks. In the early 20th century, some states banned wild grapevines outright because they could carry diseases that threatened commercial vineyards, and in certain areas, foraging them was straight up against the law. That ban is gone now, but the damage to the knowledge had already been done. Still, these vines are survivors, tangled through forests and along riverbanks right now, and winemakers are starting to experiment with wild grape varietals again. The flavor is nothing like store-bought. It is deeper, funkier, and honestly more alive. Comment and reminder time: if you are still here at fruit number 7, you are clearly someone who actually cares about real food, so go ahead and subscribe right now so you do not miss the next deep dive like this one. Fruit number 8, hackberry. This little fruit looks like a tiny cherry, but it behaves more like a date. Most of it is a large seed wrapped in a thin layer of sweet flesh that dries into a crunchy shell. For thousands of years, this was pure survival food. Plains tribes gathered hackberries by the thousands, ground the entire fruit, seed and all, into a meal, and used it in soups, cakes, and as a natural sweetener. It disappeared because processing it is tedious, each fruit is mostly seed, and industrial agriculture had zero patience for that. But hackberry trees are nearly indestructible, shrugging off extreme heat, cold, drought, and even heavy urban pollution. Some cities now plant them as street trees specifically because nothing seems to kill them. Foragers who know what they are doing still gather hackberries every fall, because that earthy, sweet, faintly peanut buttery flavor is genuinely unlike anything else. Fruit number 9, buffalo berry. These are bright red or orange berries that grow in massive clusters and taste incredibly tart, somewhere between a cranberry and a sour cherry. Tribes across the northern plains and the mountain west would harvest them by the gallon, often by spreading hides under the bushes and shaking the branches until the berries rained down. They were eaten fresh, dried for winter storage, and whipped with animal fat into a frothy traditional dessert. Buffalo berries actually evolved alongside massive grazing herds, and they are nitrogen-fixing, meaning they literally improve the soil around them as they grow. They declined as bison were slaughtered and grasslands were plowed into farmland. Now there is real renewed interest, because buffalo berries are one of the very few fruits that thrive in brutal conditions. Short growing seasons, alkaline soil, and limited water, perfect for land restoration projects happening right now. Fruit number 10, Oregon grape, and despite the name, this is not a grape at all. It is a berry that grows on an evergreen shrub across the Pacific Northwest and parts of the Rockies. The berries are deep blue, sharply tart, and loaded with a compound called berberine that has powerful antimicrobial properties. Tribes used Oregon grape as medicine for infections, digestive issues, and skin conditions, while eating the berries fresh or cooked into preserves. This one ran into legal trouble too. Selling Oregon grape extracts without FDA approval became a gray area, and wild harvesting it on public land got restricted in some regions. But Oregon grape is genuinely tough, growing in poor soil and deep shade with almost no care, which is why permaculture growers plant it in food forests. Herbalists still harvest the root sustainably, and a few craft distilleries even make Oregon grape liqueur. If a fruit being worth a 500-mile trip just to harvest it does not blow your mind a little, I do not know what will. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if that got you, and let's keep going, because these last 5 are not just forgotten, they are genuinely on the edge of disappearing for good. Fruit number 11, wild strawberry. This one is tiny, smaller than your pinky fingernail, but bite into a ripe one, and it delivers a flavor explosion that makes grocery store strawberries taste like flavored cardboard. The aroma is intense, and the sweetness is far more complex than anything bred for size. Tribes across the continent harvested wild strawberries in early summer, and for many communities, the first strawberry of the season was treated as a genuine moment of ceremony and gratitude. They are vanishing because wild strawberries need undisturbed meadows and forest edges, and we just keep mowing, paving, and developing every single one of those spaces. A few ecological restoration projects are trying to reintroduce them, but it is a painfully slow process. Fruit number 12, salmonberry. Named for its bright orange to salmon pink color, this fruit grows in the cool, wet forests of the Pacific Northwest. The flavor is mild, slightly tart, and incredibly refreshing on a hot day. Coastal tribes timed their salmonberry harvest with the actual salmon runs, eating the berries fresh, mixing them with salmon roe, or preserving them in oil. Climate change is hitting this fruit hard, since salmonberries need specific cool, moist, predictable conditions, and as weather grows more erratic, yields are dropping fast, some years barely fruiting at all. Indigenous communities across Alaska and British Columbia are now monitoring salmonberry populations as an early warning sign of broader ecosystem collapse. Fruit number 13, thimbleberry. These look a lot like raspberries, but grow on thornless shrubs with huge maple-shaped leaves. The berries are soft, fragile, and taste delicate, floral, and slightly tart all at once. They grow across the western mountains and up into Canada, and tribes always harvested them fresh, because they are too delicate to store or transport. You basically have to eat them right where you pick them, which is exactly why thimbleberries will never be commercialized. That same fragility puts them at risk, because they need stable, undisturbed forest ecosystems, and logging, development, and invasive species keep fragmenting their habitat. If you ever stumble onto a thimbleberry patch in the wild, you have genuinely found something precious. Fruit number 14, serviceberry, also called Juneberry or Saskatoon depending on where you live. These small, dark purple fruits ripen in early summer, tasting similar to a blueberry, but with a subtle hint of almond from the seeds. This was often the very first fruit to ripen each year, and many tribes held ceremonies to celebrate the serviceberry harvest. They were eaten fresh, dried for winter, and mixed into traditional survival foods. Today they are threatened mostly by habitat loss and by the simple fact that almost nobody outside indigenous communities even knows they exist. Some forward-thinking landscapers are swapping ornamental plants for serviceberries instead, which is a great start, but we genuinely need more people growing them, eating them, and passing that knowledge forward. Fruit number 15, black haw. This is our final fruit, and almost nobody has ever heard of it. It is a dark blue, almost black berry that grows on a shrub or small tree across the eastern United States. The flavor is sweet with a slight bitterness, and the texture is soft and mealy. Cherokee, Creek, and other southeastern tribes use the fruit as food and the bark as a powerful medicine, particularly for women's health. Black haw now faces serious habitat loss as forests get cleared and wetlands get drained. The trees still exist scattered here and there, but dense populations are rare, and because of its medicinal value, there is real concern about overharvesting. The knowledge of how to use it sustainably is held by fewer people every single year. So what do we actually do about all of this? Here is what is genuinely working right now. Indigenous-led conservation projects are replanting native food forests and reviving traditional harvesting practices. Seed libraries and native plant nurseries are making these species accessible to regular people again. Guerrilla grafters are quietly planting fruit trees in public spaces around cities. And communities everywhere are realizing that food sovereignty, the simple right to grow and access culturally important food, is itself an act of resistance and healing. And here is where you come in, because remember, we are lazy gardeners, not lazy people. First, support native plant nurseries because buying from them directly funds the people keeping these species alive. Second, plant just one of these fruits in your yard, a community garden, or even on a balcony, since serviceberries and thimbleberries thrive in large containers. These plants survive thousands of years without fertilizer or pesticides. They really do not need much from you, they just need a chance. Third, find local foraging groups or indigenous food sovereignty organizations near you. Learn from people who actually hold this knowledge, and show up for restoration work when you can. And fourth, just talk about this, comment about it, share this video with someone who needs to see it. The algorithm rewards engagement, so every comment and share genuinely pushes this in front of more people who have never heard any of it. Every fruit on this list represents thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. When we bring even one back into our own backyard, we are repairing a relationship with the land that got deliberately severed, honoring the people who steward these plants for generation after generation, and making our food systems more resilient, more nutritious, and more fair. And as a lazy gardener, you get to do all of that while putting in the least amount of effort possible, because these plants were built to survive on their own. One more thing before you go. There is actually a 16th fruit I deliberately left off this list, because it is so rare right now that even mentioning where to find it could put the remaining plants at serious risk. The fact that we have reached a point where the knowledge of a single fruit has to be kept quiet just to protect it, that alone should tell you everything about why this conversation matters. So tell me honestly in the comments, which of these 15 fruits are you planting first? And should we bring back forgotten native vegetables next, because that list is even wilder than this one. If this kept you watching all the way to the end, smash that subscribe button right now, drop a comment with your favorite fruit from today's list, and I will see you in the next video, lazy gardeners.